Shark. Close your eyes and imagine a shark. You're not even in the water. Just close your eyes and imagine this creature. Word. The instinct reaction is usually of mistrust. A lot of people actually have vision of death. Some are even afraid to go swimming in a pool or even in a bathtub. The problem is sharks are already born with a very negative connotation related to their name. In the ancient word of German, Schurke was actually described to basically nominate the first animal that was landed, the first shark that was landed on land by fishermen. And it actually means evil, morally reprehensible, a mean villain, and not just a villain, but a mean villain. In Latin, squalus, from which squalo derives afterwards, means covered in filth, morally degenerate. So they already arrive with a negative name. But what if I told you that instead of being vicious and mean and aggressive, sharks actually are in need of our help? So I'm here to talk about sharks, which is my world. But I'm here talking about something that people will never think about, which is the vulnerable state of sharks. So we're going to talk about how sharks are actually vulnerable, not this strong, mindless killing machine. These are animals that have been here for 450 million years. They obviously have evolved during that time. They survived 5 mass extinctions. And yet, in less than 100 years, by our mere presence, they're actually become very dwindle in their numbers. And even furthermore so after the Industrial Revolutions. What if I told you that actually sharks are one of the most vulnerable creatures on this planet? The International Union for Conservation of Nature lists 143 species of sharks out of the 500 plus as endangered, critically endangered, near threatened, vulnerable, basically on the red list. But it also lists about 210 of these species as data deficient, which means we do not know and we do not understand much about these 210 species. What it tells us is there is basically less than 1/4 of the total species of sharks in the world, which inhabit all the oceans but for the Antarctic Ocean, that are considered to under no immediate threat, less than 1/4. Sharks are under tremendous direct pressure from humankind presence, from waste. We also attack sharks by developing coastal areas. We take away a lot of the location that sharks use to mate and to leave their youngs. Never mind, we also take away a lot of the locations where the food of the sharks also goes to stay and live. If we think about it, there's actually something to be said at the times where we all have to huddle on top of a hill because we were afraid of the invasions of our next door neighbors, when piracy was very rampant in the coastal areas of the world. Today, we actually have invaded almost every available coastline, never mind every available river estuary, which is another location where sharks tend to live. Sharks need our help, and some of the sharks ask for it. I've worked with sharks in a while for the last 27 years, and I actually realized how very little we know about them. And I actually realized how very little the people around me and the people that even are maybe in close proximity know about them or want to understand them. There's a lot of trust into what I call the land-based hearsay. So we just hear these things and we just think, well, that is what I read on the internet. That is what I heard. That is what I was told. And we kind of like sometimes a shutdown between what we hear and maybe the reality of what some people like me bring up to the surface. There's this traditional joke in my part of the world that says, oh, you know, why sharks don't eat lawyers? professional courtesy. But the thing is actually if lawyers behave like sharks, they will never win a court case, because sharks are very, very clear behaviors. They're very easy to read once we take time to understand them. And their intentions and directness is very glaring once we actually do appreciate how they work. I think it's one of the actually easiest animals to be in the wild with. They have a tolerance of our presence that other wild animals will not have. I grew up in the central Congo, and the awareness that we had to have for wild animals around us was much higher than the awareness I have to have when I'm in the ocean with sharks. Not only the Caribbean reef sharks that I work with, but other sharks that are considered predatory that I dive with on a regular basis, like the bull sharks or the tiger sharks or the oceanic whitetip or the great hammerheads. So why is that? Well, one of the things is the sharks have 8 senses. They have what I call superpowers. They can actually detect electromagnetic fields. They can feel water movement. They can feel our heartbeat. They can feel the brain waves. They can feel even like how a fish moves. And they have a very, very, very keen sense of smell. So they're obviously extremely well adapted to their environment, and they can actually really work well within their environment. And that is what gives us the capability of sharing the ocean with the sharks and them understanding who we are and the fact that we are not part of their food chain. Let me give you some numbers. The odds of a shark attack are 1 in an 11.5 million people. I took some numbers, and I took numbers from the US just because this is the country I live the closest with. There's about 75 million people that engage in water activities in the US coastlines per year. Of the 75 million people per year, is being recorded a total of 26 fatalities in the last 40 years. So you can do the math. Here's other numbers. You're most likely to die from falling out of bed, 1 in a 2 million. Drowning in a bathtub. Remember the bathtub people were afraid to go in because of Jaws and the sharks? Is 1 in a 680,000. That is the chances of dying in a bathtub. I actually have installed a shower in my apartment. Hit by lightning, which is a very rare occasion, but it's 1 in a 500,000. And let's not forget, car accident, 1 in a 300. It's actually 267, but I rounded up to 300. So these are the numbers and the likelihood to die compared to the likelihood of being actually struck by a shark. On the opposite side of the spectrum is humans. Humans remove an average of 80 million sharks per year out of the ocean. 80 millions. So how do we change this? How do we put up the fact that sharks are not aggressive and mean and vicious, but they actually have this extremely vulnerable state? I do this through what I call the power of one. I do believe that the actions of one person can change the course of history. I'm pretty sure each one of you has one person that I can refer to that said, that person changed not only how I feel, the way I view certain things in the world, but that person changed the course of history. And we can kind of like list quite a lot of them. So I decided that in my small, I will be one of those people that maybe could do something to change the fate of sharks. I do this through my work in the water with them. So I share them with other people who want to dive. But primarily what I try to do is bring up the images and the stories for those people, the majority of them, who cannot come in the water with us, who cannot see the sharks. And so I bring up a different view, which is the reality, what I call the truth about sharks. I spend time with them. So I understand their behavior, their communication, and also their needs. I recognize each animal that I work with, and I'm able to monitor and log their movement, their health, and overall well-being. I actually can write it down, and I don't need to tag them. I just visually recognize them. This is one of the most common comments I receive from people. Oh, they all look the same. But to me, they don't. They have different facial and body features. They have different unique marks on their bodies. And they even have a distinctive way of swimming. The same way each one of us has a distinctive way of walking. The same way we can recognize a loved one gait in a crowded place. It's like, oh, that is my mom. I can recognize how she walks or how she carries her purse. So I name my sharks. But I name them with names that reflect their appearance. So people swim with Scrunchy, Crook, Hook, Stumpy, Peggy, rather than Stephanie, Sylvia, or Josephine. But primarily I swim with female sharks. So these names are associated with their physical features, allow for a quick recognition, even from a first timer, even from someone looking at the video. And so once there is a name, there is a connection. All of a sudden, there is a unique relationship. This allows me to connect the person to the shark through my interaction. Some of my sharks allow me to pet them. They actually come and lay still in my lap while I gently stroke their heads. Once I have that name, once I have that behavior, the animal is no longer a gray swimming body through the water. It's an individual. And when that, there's a recognized appearance and behavior. And so people email me and say, how's grandma doing? How's a Stumpy? Oh, I would love to come and meet Scrunchy, because now they really understand who these animals are. So this close connection that I have has taught me to read behavior, and not only in them, but obviously in similar species. And for me, it's very important to understand shark behavior. But understanding shark behavior comes from spending time with them and observing, being quiet, being peaceful, being patient. All in all, no matter how many hours you spend on the water with them, our time is limited. I can only stay down there however so many hours per day. There are limits caused by the scuba diving, by the nitrogen, by the gas that I'm breathing, by my resistance to become hypothermic. We all become hypothermic in the water. So there are different methods. People put cameras in the water, but I think the time directly with them is very, very important. And so as I spend time with them, I start recognizing some of the things that really affect them. Some of the sharks in my groups are showing up with hooks. And I notice that they actually show signs of distress. And I can tell this because when they don't have the hook, they behave in a certain way. And when they have the hook, they behave in a different one. The actions, I notice they have difficulty eating. So what I do, I start removing the hooks. The same way I would remove a thorn out of my dog's paw. Of these 300 plus hooks that I have removed, I have a special story. It's the story of Foggy Eye. She was a shark that I've been diving with for a very long time, but never liked to come in my lap. She was one of the sharks that did not like to be pet. And then one day she showed up with a very difficult hook. I could see the wire coming out of her mouth, but I could not see the hook. So after about 40 minutes of trying to remove the hooks and failed attempt, I basically dived with my arm deep into her mouth and removed that one hook. The two unique things that happened. First of all, during those 40 minutes, every time I tried and failed, she would come back and allow me to try again. And this is amazing. Most of my sharks allow me to try so many times to remove their hook. But after I removed that one, Foggy Eye became the shark that actually would constantly come into my lap and lean into me just to be pet without even me asking. So just a total different behavior just from that. So what are these 300 hooks? They are the direct care to the sharks that I love and work with, but they're also a symbol. They have become the important connection. I would say the important hook to connect sharks to people. People all of a sudden realize the sharks can actually hurt and can actually be vulnerable. And they reach out and ask, how can I help? Many want to come in the water with me to help removing sharks. I usually recommend people to not try to remove a hook from the shark if they see an animal in the wild. Please don't do that. It takes time, it takes knowledge, it takes gear, it takes protection. However, this desire has opened up a conversation. So that communication that I have with sharks now is transferring to communication to people. And I've bridged sharks and people. So when they ask how to protect sharks, I usually say, if you talk, government responds. And we have a perfect example here in the Bahamas. In 2011, we heard that sharks were threatened by outside countries that wanted to come here and fish our healthy population of sharks. And I started a petition which gathered 25,000 signatures, which then was picked up and absorbed by our Bahama National Trust and the Pew organization. And the request from all these people, from all the local Bahamians, had the government declare sharks completely protected in Bahamian waters. And they have been since 2011. So when people speak, governments respond. And this is what I call the power of one. It stems from one person, one action, but it's like a stone, a ripple in the water. So you may say that it's ambitious to think that one person can make a difference, right? So I call myself ambitious because I do believe each one of us, each one of you actually, can make that difference. It comes from first knowledge, desire to understand, maybe asking questions, being open to change our mindset so that we can change the world one action at a time.